Hi, I'm Frank Lesee, former state senator from Wisconsin, a former president of the Heartland Institute, and I served in Governor Walker's administration. I'm here to talk about climate and the misinformation on climate that we have, and because it's so important, because the misinformation on climate is being used to drive really bad energy policy that's going to hurt regular Americans, hurt our country, put us in a weaker place, and ship jobs overseas to China. And on worse than that, we're going to spend trillions of dollars on something that even John Kerry says won't make any difference at all.
Could you tell us some of the misconceptions that people have about climate change, all that stuff out there? What is the narrative being set, and what are the corrections you'd like to make to that?
Well, one is the Earth is a little bit warmer, but mainly its winters are less cold. Winters are less cold. Mm-hmm. It's not that summers are a lot hotter. Mm-hmm. Also, spring and fall are a bit longer. I would say those are good things. Mm-hmm. The growing seasons are moving a little bit north, and they're longer, so your plants grow better. CO2 is plant food, and people have been trained now to kind of, especially the younger, to be afraid of it. Our sailors and submarines go down under the water for 3 months to a year, and they breathe 4 to 5 times more CO2 than we have in our atmosphere. Sometimes as much as 10 or 15 times more than we have in our atmosphere. It's this kind of misinformation that's out there and the demonization of CO2, and actually that's what makes your beer fizz and makes your Coke bubble and makes those seltzer drinks really great. Mm-hmm. I mean, those are all good things, but we don't talk about the good things. The other is it's the control knob of the climate. It's simply not true. According to NASA, it's not Frank Lesee saying this, according to NASA, the biggest, most important, most abundant greenhouse gas is not CO2. 100 times more water's in the atmosphere than there is CO2. Water is the most important. And then clouds. This is again, NASA says, it's impossible, just like the weather, about 2 weeks, 3 weeks out, they can't predict the weather at all. Sometimes they can't even predict it 3 days out. Mm-hmm. And they're going to predict the weather 10 or 100 years from now. It's ridiculous. NASA says because clouds both warm and cool the earth, they do both. Mm-hmm. And we're getting more moisture, that's a fact. We're a little bit warmer, that's a fact. That they can't predict the future climate at all, because it could warm the earth, it could cool the earth. Well, but global warming's all run away. So they're using this issue to do a lot of other things. That's one big misconception that's very cleverly been hid and never talked about, is the fact that water is 100 times more abundant in the atmosphere and more powerful than CO2. The second big one is man, with all of our activities, and cement is a big CO2 releaser, didn't know that. Making steel is a big CO2. When you get in your car and drive someplace, lots of CO2 went into all of that. And we burn fossil fuels, but petroleum products, we burn those things. People have no idea how much of that we use, both on a worldwide basis and in the United States. Just to give you some clue about it, the United States uses 20 million barrels of oil a day. Mm-hmm. A day. And to think we can easily and not expensively, cheaply, replace it with wind and solar that are part-time energy is just plain wrong and just plain a lie.
Also takes fossil fuels to make those things.
Lots of fossil fuels, and they contain rare earth minerals and things, which you have to move lots of dirt in order to get a small amount. And all of that costs money, and it all releases CO2. Mm-hmm. And then the other thing is going back to this, man's activities release 50 billion tons, which sounds like a really lot. That's a lot. Well, the Earth naturally releases 20 times that amount.
Are we having any impact?
I think we have some impact, but more of the impact, and it's documented, is when you take an area that has no people in it, and then 1,000 people move into it, that increases temperature by about 0.5 degree in that area. Mm-hmm. If you think, it's not so much once you get beyond that 1,000, once a city's there, it doesn't get a lot warmer. Mm-hmm. But you think about that, and we're doing that all over the place, 0.5 degree warmer in that area, but you go back out in the country, it's the normal temperatures there. Mm-hmm. So we do have an effect there. Does CO2 have some effect? Yeah, sure, it does, some, but not as much as they're saying. And in fact, as you put more CO2 in the air, and there have been times in the past for Earth that we've had thousands. We've had thousands parts per million. Right now we're at about 415 parts per million, and it's going up 2 or 3 parts per million a year. Mm-hmm. And that's very likely to continue no matter what we do. John Kerry, our climate envoy who negotiated the Paris Agreement, John Gulfstream Kerry, because he flies around Gulf Streams, he and his wife have a carbon footprint of probably a small city. Really, and they want us to suffer for it. And he said, it's out there on the internet, take a look. He says, no matter what we do, it won't make any difference at all. Mm-hmm. Because the Chinese, the Indians, the Africans, the South Americans,
more
the
developing
Japanese
countries, they all use fossil fuels.
Well, they're all building coal plants right now. Mexico just said, they were on this path to do the crazy stuff we in Canada and Europe are doing, and they said, forget it, we're going back to coal, we're putting our little coal miners back to work again, and we will have reliable coal. The big problem with wind and solar, and this is another one, if you have a business that has to run 24/7, you want to go to a gas station that stays open all the time. What if the employees who work there stop working as soon as the wind stopped or the sun went down? You can't run a business that way, and you can't power a home that way. The big misconception people just don't understand or know is that our electric grids really have to stay completely in balance all the time. Electrons off have to equal electrons on.
Okay.
And you can't put too many electrons on. That's the other problem with wind and solar.
You can't save it as well either.
Well, batteries are really expensive. They don't last very long. And I saw a reliable report that said if you were going to do battery backup, and if you went totally to wind and solar, you need at least a week of battery backup, because the wind and sun can be blocked by clouds and no wind for literally a week. So you need at least a week, if not two, of battery backup. Just to do New York City would cost $1 trillion or more.
That's incredible. So let me ask you one final question. What do you think the way forward should be for energy? I think everyone wants cleaner energy, sure. But what's a not insane way to get to cleaner energy that's more efficient? And what would you say that would be?
Well, right now, this is one of those other big things, and I've talked to a lot of people as a state senator and asked this question over and over again. Right now, here in Florida, or where are you from?
We're from Pennsylvania.
Pennsylvania. The water in Pennsylvania, or in Wisconsin, or here in Florida, is the water here in the lakes, rivers, and streams cleaner or dirtier than it was 20 years ago?
I would say it's cleaner.
It's far cleaner. But 9 out of 10 people get that one wrong. The air that we breathe here, Pennsylvania and Wisconsin, even in the big cities.
Much cleaner.
Much
Look at those
cleaner.
old photos, there's a smog coming through all the big cities.
And it's actually so much cleaner. And coal, for instance, we use clean coal technology here. And actually, I just learned this recently. There's so much things to learn with this. That plasterboard that builds houses, that drywall, drywall is manufactured out of that clean coal process. So you end coal, now prices of drywall are going to go up.
Yep.
So they pull that stuff out and they put it in it. They also use it for other building materials. So we're using that technology here, but the coal plants they're building around the world, they're not. And rather than stiff arm them and try to stop Africa from developing, people there desperately want electricity, and it's a big move. If they can move from burning wood and cutting down forests, or burning poo, dung, to propane or electricity, even coal-powered, big help to the environment. If they were truly serious, for instance, your question, if you're truly serious, rather than buying one school bus, an electric school bus that costs $200,000 to $400,000, you can retrofit a diesel engine to turn it into a propane engine, and it'll cut emissions by 50%. So instead of spending $200,000 on one electric bus, you could retrofit 20 school buses, diesel buses, and they cost savings every year. A propane engine works better, it costs less to maintain, and you'd immediately cut CO2 emissions by a lot. That electric bus has lots more CO2 emissions built into it because of the big battery that it needs, and it's going to take years, decades even, to even break even on the CO2 equation. So this isn't really about CO2 at all. It's about money, rewarding your friends, doing an emerging issue, emerging things, but really it's about
feel good about yourself.
Feel good, virtue signaling. But another part that I just want to let people think about is when we made a transition from horses to cars. There was no government subsidies, there was no forcing of it by legislation. People wanted cars when they became affordable, and as soon as they could afford them, they bought them. I do think electric cars are really cool, and I think there's some real pluses to them, and there's some minuses to them, but they'll never tell you about the minuses.
Right.
But and we should be fair about that and have open discussions about it. If it's truly a better product, we'll migrate there, and that's good. But to force it and have taxpayers pay for it, ship our jobs overseas, create terrible inflation, make poor people suffer more energy poverty and make hard choices, or move to smaller places, or have to, there's so many bad things that are going on with this policy, and it's built on really misinformation.
Well, thank you so much for explaining that. We really do appreciate you taking the time with us.